So hello everyone. Thanks for the chat box. Let me know where you're watching from. I should be up here on your screen. So here I am, trying to stay excited about life after 14 days at home. Found it a bit difficult, well, not too difficult, but it's hard to keep self-motivated. So webinars are keeping me busy. Thanks for signing up. You should see a chat box on your screen. So if you're watching on an iPad or an iPhone, you might want to just tap the screen and see the chat box pop up. If you're on a desktop, it's probably there in front of you. So just let me know where you're watching from. So we've got people all over the place. Someone in Dubai, great, welcome. County Antrim, fantastic. So say hello. Give me some feedback. So this, I've designed this as an introduction. So you've all got your videos on or off. It's your call, so it'll all be recorded and shared within the group. So we've got about 20 to 30 people joining in. So I'll probably just flip between the admin and let people in. So we've just got someone coming in now. And I'll bring your microphones on. I want you to take part where possible, like I would do in a face-to-face teacher training session. So if you can have a pen and a piece of paper to hand, because I'm going to ask you to show little examples up on the screen, and thumbs up and thumbs down. And I'll try and switch between cameras so we can see each other and things like that. Okay. So thanks for everyone saying hello. I'm going to skip past me. You've probably seen my website, know who I am. So retrieval practice. On one side, you've got PhD theory, scientific, positive type approach to research. On the other side, you've got doctoral type research. Practice is where teachers, doctors, and nurses sit. If you're doing a doctoral degree like I am, you're kind of wanting to blend a bit of theory with practice. And I guess the huge explosion with research and teaching is blending between these two extremes. And you know, I've been teaching 27 years, so you've got the cynical teacher, you know, the people with a lot more experience might think, well, we've done this before, it's all come around again. Perhaps, but I don't ever remember learning about retrieval practice as a trainee teacher, even though it goes back, retrieval practice, many years, many decades. And it's because teachers have always done retrieval practice. It's just we haven't done it consciously. Going back to the scientific spectrum, you've got retrieval, which is cognitive science. And on the other side, we've got what teachers call it, revision. So if you've ever done revision with your kids, you've been doing retrieval practice your entire career. So there's a good chance you've already been doing much of this stuff. But I think it's good to look at retrieval practice techniques. I'm going to just signpost a couple of things on my blog and just show you a couple of books I've got on my desk that you may or may not have seen on social media and things like that. First one's called Powerful Teaching. So it's I think it's a hardback only at the moment, and you can get this from Dr. Pooja Agarwal. I'm going to show you a couple of podcasts on my site. So here we go. Here she is there, red jumper, and her colleague Patrice Bain, and that's her podcast there. So this is Pooja, that's Patrice. They're both authors. They wrote this book together. And they were, I guess, tutees of Henry Roediger and Brown, who made that light blue cover, Make It Stick, which some of you may have seen. So that's a good book. There's also another good book from a colleague, Kate Jones in Dubai, who's written a recent book published by John Catt called Retrieval Practice. There's a couple of bits of research here you might want to signpost. So all I've done is type retrieval practice in the search bar. I'm going to come back to this one here about the rule of three. There's a bit of red pen research here. You know, do read beyond what I'm telling you, but this essentially said if I only use a red pen for examination assessments, it increases students' mental health and decreases their performance. There's nothing wrong with using a red pen, but I need to make it a routine and a regular occurrence. So there's a few other things on there. So my new book, so I've had the pleasure of visiting schools all around the world until 14 days ago. So I'm trying to do it online at the moment till we all get back to normal lives. My book, Just Great Teaching, I've probably visited about 170 schools in 15 countries. And I've realized that broadly, good teaching ideas work anywhere. but particularly number 3, teaching is nuanced. It has subtle shades. So first question from me on the chat box to give me a bit of help. Could you tell me what age group you teach and subject? Okay, so I'll, unless you beat me, I'm going to put 11 to 18 and /DT. That's my area of expertise. Okay, and then I can at least pitch. Okay, he's got a wide range of subjects as expected, lots of secondary, a couple of primary. Okay, all subjects primary, of course, 16 plus adults, children 8 to 9 special needs. Okay, so thanks for everyone. So we've got a wide range. So whatever ideas I'm going to share here, common sense prevails. They're going to have to be adapted to meet different contexts. So that's really important. And if I go back to the point number 2 on the screen, again, you've got that PhD, the theory, the research, the science, and then you've got the craft of teaching on the left. So bringing this research into practice. And I think back to when I started to train in 1993, lots of it about the kind of child development, the psychology. So it's a little bit about how, but it's great to see how the profession's moving more towards the why and the how, not just the what. So I'm going to start off with a little definition. So here's a 30-second example, and this is from Rose and Shine, which I'll signpost. I'm suspecting some of you will have seen it. A daily review is an important component of teacher instruction. It helps strengthen the connections. So I'm going to come back to memory later. I'm reading another great book. I'm just going to grab it from my desk here, called Connect the Dots by Trish Taylor. It's all about relationships, mindset, and there's a whole section in here on memory. And I've been fascinated with memory for probably 5-6 years in my own research and work with cognitive psychologists. And I wish I'd learned it earlier as a trainee teacher. I think I would have been a much better teacher. In the chat box, have you seen Rose and Shine? So I'm going to assume yes, but please tell me yes or no in your chat box, because not everybody will have. And I know people are watching from lots of different countries, and I don't want to go over all the kind of stuff before. So some people, so we've got about a 2/3 yes, a third no. So I'm not going to dwell on this. If you copy the title, just pop to my blog. Rose and this piece of research has been around for 8 years. I put it on my site about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I put it in my book in Mark Plan Teach 3 years ago, and it's now doing all the rounds. One of my colleagues, Tom Sherrington, who used to be my head teacher, he's written a great book recently. It's been very popular. What I did with the research is I wrote a paragraph. So this is a 5-minute read on the site. A paragraph about what the research says and a paragraph about what teachers can do. And what I'm aiming to do is blend the science, so 40 years of Rose and Shine's research, with what a teacher can do, and then how you translate this. If I just go back to number 8 here, based on all the subjects you've told me in the chat box and the age group that you teach, this will be incredibly difficult and very varied in different subjects. I guess the greatest thing I've learned after 27 years of teaching is on my travels to schools around the world. I'm way out of my comfort zone if you put me in an early years classroom, and suddenly some of my best strategies may not work or will have a huge hit and miss kind of return. So I'm going to model 1 or 2 of these. I'm just going to come and signpost some of the things in here. And then how to use retrieval practice. You've got all the usual stuff and many, many more. Okay. So you'll do any exercise, quizzes, what's that famous quiz show? God, I've forgotten it now. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Sorry. Mnemonics, which I'll give you one of my best ones, and all the different things that you always do. So there's nothing new there. Here's a minute definition. I'm just going to grab a glass of drink of water while you read that middle paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this part. Okay, it becomes more difficult as the number of items tested increases. Okay, which is why research supports that if you regularly quiz kids throughout your curriculum rather than just at the end or at key moments, and the regular quiz could just be how do you spell X, then that's going to support their long-term retention. So if you think of improving teacher development, many schools still work on the basis of 5 bog standard inset days an academic year, if you're lucky. And often they are filled with the usual safeguarding stuff, a couple of other things, and then we might have a kind of happier type conference after exams into the kind of June season, when many happy schools that I visit have now got rid of this and moved it to afternoon sessions. And some of you watching will have that model. When my school built Mark Plan Teach, we did this for 3 years. And it still exists today at the school. We got rid of CPD as we know it. We put it into a after school session, and it allowed this in particular. If it works for kids, it's going to work for teacher pedagogy, and it will improve teacher performance. So that would be a top tip for me in terms of developing teacher practice, as well as improving students' retention. So I'm going to give you an example here. I'm going to introduce you to a new word. Now, 1 or 2 of you maybe worked with me before, you'll be familiar with this. Could use lots. But later I'm going to bring your microphones on and ask you to show me things on the camera. But I want you to be able to pronounce this word, phronesis. I want you to be able to tell me what it means. So the wise teachers watching who have done above the average, and I'm talking about England here, the average lifespan of a teacher is 13 years. So people who are at plus 13 years in the career, they will have this phronesis. Now in the classroom, what it looks like is if I give you the glower, which is that one eyebrow stare, and you move seats without me speaking, an inexperienced teacher watching me may not know how I did that. But through thousands of idiosyncratic decisions on my feet, that's inside my internal database, it's calculating away, making me make decisions, I build up a bank of wisdom. And that's why we all have those teachers that we work with throughout our whole career who've got this huge wealth of knowledge, and often some of it is not, it's visible, but it's often not articulated. So this is phronesis here. So later I want you to be able to tell me how to spell it, how to pronounce it, phronesis, and tell me what it means, professional wisdom, okay? So there's a little cue for retrieval practice coming up. Now, some other ideas in the classroom, okay? You've got these kind of things, and again, you will have 1,000 others. So think about just some of these basic techniques of how you can use them in the classroom. Some of you are primary teachers, some of you will be using things like Kahoot, Quizlet, Socrative. On that note, I'm just going to come out of a slide before I give you a little test again. You go to the blog section. So this is all recorded. If you give me 30 minutes after the session, the video will compress and I'll send it to you all to watch back. If you scroll down to this blog, I wrote this a couple of Sundays ago when the realization was that we're all stuck at home. 46 ideas how to teach online. There are a million others, but these were just ones that came straight to my head. Got all the quiz and stuff you can use with kids. You'll already be using some of these. I've got loads of video tips for teachers. So I'm using Zoom. Okay, and I'm sure some of you will be using it. Some of your school leaders may be a bit shy or reluctant to use video technology with kids. I'll come on to that point later. And then loads of resources. Oops, loads of resources that you can use also for your teachers, plus many more that your school already subscribes to. As a result of publishing this, I had lots of safeguarding questions, particularly from head teachers using Zoom. So there's been a huge spike in people using Zoom compared to Skype. And what Zoom allows you to do, I've got the license just beyond the basic, but the basic allows you to teach for 40 minutes and have 100 people logged in. You pay for, I think it's about £150. You can go beyond the 40 minutes. But I wrote a safeguarding blog on Sunday to help school leaders work through all the links and resources. So here's an example of an IT/SLT version of setting up the technical side and the safeguarding things to consider if you want to use this. I know I'm going slightly off piece here, but you can kind of look through that later in terms of tips for rolling out this expertise within your schools. Because if we're still going to be at home for another, and I know people are watching different locations, but for England, we're going into week 2, rumours 8-12 weeks, about looking after our own mental health as well as kids. That live interactions probably a wise solution. So more suggestions here. Now, I've got a coffee cup, Land Rover coffee cup. your bog standard coffee cup size. I'm going to start to pose some questions in a moment. And I want you to start to have a little think about things as I pose different retrieval questions and also start to talk about memory. Now, of course, we're doing this remotely, but in the classroom, if it was really busy, a great plenary question, if we were teaching maths or circumference, and I suddenly had a Malteser, I don't have one to hand, but if I had a Malteser in my hand, I can start to ask various questions to retrieve circumference data that you may have learnt in the maths lesson. So first question would be, how many Maltesers could you fit in this coffee cup? And I would then give you a bit of thinking time, and then I would ask you to retrieve the information, and then I might let you hold the Malteser and work out the circumference and have a discussion. Now, that question I've asked, not only is it a great retrieval thing to do, but it's a great workload tip because often it gets kids talking straight away. Because we're doing this remote, it's a bit harder to achieve, but I'm just going to signpost one other blog idea before I move on. What I asked you was a Fermi question. So in statistics, the chap that designed these was, well, the questions are named after Enrico Fermi. And if you go in these two blogs, you'll see a whole set of 200 or 300 questions, just lots of different ways, but they're all based on how many. They're great statistical questions. They get kids thinking, good retrieval of what's happened the lesson before, perhaps. And if you're teaching younger kids, rather than me ask her how many, I could say, what will happen if I drop this coffee cup? How might it shatter on concrete or in a bath of water, and get the discussion. As kids start to talk, I can drink some water, I can turn the projector on, I can have a pep talk with Claire outside, for example, and get that precious breathing time that I need. So what I'm going to do is, it's really dangerous to assume that people have learnt something. So it's important to test. So you just saw me delete the slide there. I'm going to bring your microphones on. And before I do, I'm going to just set some ground rules. I don't want anybody to call out. And if you've got any background noise, I might just mute your microphone just for the benefit of the recording. But when I say your name, I just want you to retrieve what I've already taught you. Okay? So microphones coming on now. Hello, everybody. We all there?
Hello.
Hi.
So, here's the first question. Catherine, could you spell phronesis for me, please?
P-H-R-E-N. No, that's wrong. It's got an O in it.
Don't check your notes, because I'm going to talk about memory later.
It's hidden. It's under my laptop.
Okay.
Phronesis. P-H-R-E-N-S-I-S. No.
Okay, I'm going to come back. Rebecca, can you have a go?
P-H-R-O-N-E-S-I-S.
Okay, great. Lynn, could you tell everybody what phronesis means?
It's practical wisdom.
Okay, fantastic. And what I can do is pose, pulse, pounce, bounce, bring everybody in rather than me give the answer, because I'm making it too easy for everyone. I need to make you work harder. I'm going to just switch to this little slide here on memory. And I'm going to talk about this as we go through. You'll see here I've got phronesis with the vowels missing. Let's see. Kelly, what vowels are missing?
O-E-I.
Okay, great. Let me just delete that slide. So if I come to memory, we've got short-term memory. You've learnt the word phronesis. I'm retrieving it from currently your short-term memory, because you've only just learnt this word. If I go into working memory, so you know how to spell it, everybody I assume knows what it means, but I'm now going to challenge your working memory. I'm going to ask Sue, could you spell phronesis backwards without checking your notes?
S-I-S-E-N-O-R-H-P.
Excellent. You deserve a teacher toolkit sticker. Okay, well done. So you get the idea. So short-term phronesis, working memory, it's limited. So 1 times 1 times 1 plus 2, or spell phronesis backwards. And I'll come back to this later, as I want to do certain techniques to make sure if I was teaching about phronesis, I want it to be in your long-term memory. So I'm going to come back to that later. I'm going to put you all back on mute. Thanks, everybody. So let's go back to here. It's really dangerous to assume students have learnt. What we need to do as teachers is, if we don't have the technology, such as like iPads and voting, we do thumbs up, thumbs down, red, amber, green flashcards, or show me your mini whiteboard. So I got another example. Now I know one or two of you have been in my dual coding, so you will have seen this one, so bear with me. I'm going to show everybody a text on the screen. I want you to read it, and then I'm going to give you an instruction, and then you're going to show me something on your video. Okay, so I'm going to read you, I'm going to show you some text. I want you to read it, and then I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then you're going to show me something on the screen. So make sure you have a pen handy. Could you read the first couple of paragraphs for me on this? Okay, so we've got a frame of the upright seat, chain-driven bike, diamond frame, a truss consisting of true triangles, the front and the rear, and then we go into the tubes. Could you now draw me a bike on your piece of paper and show me on your computer screen when you're ready? So I know not everyone's got their cameras on, that's fine, but people that are happy to. So let's see, Rebecca, a bit closer. Okay, great. Is it Delith? Thank you, Delith. Lynn, fantastic. Paul, great. Thank you, Paul. Rebecca, thank you. Catherine, a little bit closer. Down a bit, down a bit. Great, thank you. Johannes, great. Claire, a little bit up, 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 up. Okay, great, thank you. Susanna, okay, thank you. And let's see, Catherine, one more. Nicola, a bit closer. Okay, great. Okay, thanks everyone for sharing that. All the people have seen, Andrew and Sue, thank you. Okay, now I'm going to show you I'm going to give you some more information. I'm going to show you a picture, and then I'm going to give you an instruction. So here is a picture of a bike. It just so happens to be an exploded drawing, not a complete bike. Well, it is a complete bike, but not connected. Now, retrieval practice, again, I'm assuming, but I need to, if we're in class, I would be asking questions. I'm assuming you know what a bike is. I'm also assuming that you have ridden a bike at some point in your life, perhaps not, but let's go with we have. Next instruction, alongside your first attempt, I want a second version, but before you draw the second version, I want you to look at the rear sprockets over here on the screen. And let me see if I can get some doodles coming up. No, I'll leave that for now. The rear sprocket, it fits in the back of this rear truss. It goes around the back of the chain, pedaling, etc., moves the bike, and the sprocket goes around the back wheel of the spokes. Could you draw another bicycle, same as your first version, but a separate drawing, and I want the sprocket to be clearly identified and labelled and correctly spelt. Okay, so could you draw a bike, please? Okay, so remember, learning's emotional. Okay, some of you are thinking, I can't draw. This is what kids experience in the classroom. This is when our working memory becomes challenged. We're retrieving information from our long-term memory, but at this stage it's subconscious, so we're trying to make it more conscious. When you're ready, stick it up on the screen. Let's see the sprocket. It clearly labelled, and I can see it on the back of your wheel, but your whole bike is complete. You ready, Susanna? No? Okay. Johannes? Okay, fantastic, thank you. What an improvement. Okay, thank you, Johannes. Let's see, Catherine, thank you. Nicola, thank you. Paul? Okay, great. Thank you, Lynn. Let's have a scroll through. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so moving on. So if I show you on the screen, so my Just Great Teaching, can we all see these two cartoons? So my editor, who cycles to work at Bloomsbury in Tottenham Court Road in London, she cycles every day, but when I asked her to draw a bike from her long-term memory, you can see her drawing was pretty poor. When I then asked her to draw a bike with an image that I showed to her, you can see her drawing improved significantly. So even though we may use things, our memory, or whether it's our drawing abilities, also another question, you can see that actually this drawing not too bad when she sees the drawing, but when we're relying on our long-term memory, which is sometimes explicit, so the subconscious and not reliable, and sometimes it becomes an emotional memory rather than something that we could, I'll come onto in a moment what I mean by episodic and semantic memory. We need more reliable ways to retrieve. So that's just a little demonstration. So I'm kind of giving you not only some techniques that you'll all do in your sleep, or the Fermi question, how many Maltesers? You guess, I get some breathing time, but I then introduce a Malteser so you can see it and hold it to work out the circumference. There are other ways of doing it. And as we take this further, I could then give you the dual coding technique. So another webinar I do on dual coding looks at the same kind of processes, plus retrieval. There is now the text and the completed bicycle, and we might bring the bicycle into the classroom or take the children on a bike ride. On the note of memory, there are lots of research to suggest that students need a real life experience to enhance their recall. So if you're interested, I could send you a bit of research. You just ping me an email. I'll send you a bit of research. If you ever need to convince your school leader about going on a trip, despite all the costs and the risk assessments, there's lots of research to suggest that memory and a real life experience is often an important aspect of learning, and it supports retrieval. So if you want to improve exam results, there's a great excuse. Now you'll all be familiar with question techniques. They'll all be, you'll be familiar with a lot of these. I wrote about pose, pause, pounce, bounce in The Guardian about 12 years ago, I think. This is from a teacher I used to work with. She met Dylan William. Dylan William talked about it in a keynote somewhere. It was on a YouTube video, and it went not viral, but it started to spread. So it's a technique where you pose, pause the question, give kids time to think, you pounce on a student, and then you bounce their answer to another student rather than me give the answer. Most of you will be familiar with this. These two here are from Doug Lamoff's Teach Like a Champion. So you'll, cold call is essentially, sometimes when my mock plan teach, I'll share a few videos from Doug's work. I'm going to, for the benefit of the video, assume that not everyone knows about his website, but maybe about the book, if I can spell it correctly. Teach Like a Champion. Doug puts out tons of videos, tons of blogs explaining all this. It's worth signing up to the newsletter. If I can spell it correctly, here we go. And he's got great resources and blogs that articulate all the different strategies. So here it is there, teachlikeachampion.com. Last time I spoke with Doug, I think he was working on version 3. So there's tons of stuff in here in the blog that model some of these ideas. Cold call, I can ask anybody, I expect a response. If you get it wrong, I come back to you after I've worked around the classroom and ask you to enhance your answer. Now you know the correct answer. I've talked about Fermi. Some of you may or may not know about the question matrix. I'll just show you my example. This is one of the most popular resources on my site. What I love about the question matrix is it allows me to scaffold questions to reduce my cognition, to reduce my workload or thinking, and connect the question. So you choose a question on the left, connect it to the one at the top, and you can add an image. So this might be the Mona Lisa. You can see examples here. It might be the picture of the virus, and then I use a question on the left, connect it to the right, and I connect it and frame the question. I've seen this work really well as a blank grid in kids' books where they fill in the questions themselves for a scheme of work, good for retrieval. A big poster in the classroom, kids come and stick a post-it note up on the wall. And also if you teach art, PE or drama, you cut the middle bit out, put acetate over the top, and you hold it as a window as we look at still life or a performance. It's also a great resource for vulnerable kids and for your teaching assistants to use. You'll know these. Mass screen, show me your whiteboard, thumbs up, thumbs down, green, amber, red, amber, green. C3 before me is a great technique to reduce workload. It encourages self and peer assessment. Essentially, go and see 3 other kids before coming back to me. Okay, C3 before me. It's a great little mantra. Get that instilled in your kids. They'll automatically start to peer assess before they come to you. Think, pair, share. We all do this in our sleep. I'm not going to read all the slides, but if I go back to this question, how many Maltesers? What I would do physically is I'd get you to pair up. But again, I don't know if Helen, Kelly or Sue are actually thinking about my questions. So in order to retrieve, I need to make it a concrete response, which is why often the thumbs up show me in class, or the whiteboard, or write it down, hide it, then pair up and show a friend. Because if I see that you've done that, I know that you've thought about it. Otherwise, I haven't got a clue if you've actually thought about my question. So to make your think, pair, share more effective, always get the students to write something down or say it out aloud. So based on those podcasts that I did with Pooja and Patrice, I'll just pop back to those results there. They're about a 20-minute listen. I'd really encourage you to listen to them. I learned loads just from interviewing them, and Pooja gave me the best definition. The simple art of writing it down or saying it out aloud is sufficient to retrieve from long-term memory. Whether the kids get the answer right or wrong, it's putting stress on that long-term retention, and it's helping improve that performance. So that's my best definition that I can pass on to you from those 2 ladies. Quizzes, you'll be all doing these kind of things. So again, I mean, this one some of you may not be familiar with. This does a QR code, QWIQR. You stick it in the kid's book, your phone or iPad scans it. You can then do a voice recording, a photograph, a video, and it scans it to the QR code on the cloud. So if I lose my books, it doesn't matter, I log in and I can see all the scans or pictures I've taken of your work. So it's another way of kind of building up a record and giving opportunity to retrieve. So you'll be doing all those types of things. We take it a little bit further. I'm not going to dwell too much on this slide, but it's really important to build in forgetting. Now, without going into too much detail, some of you will be familiar with Ebbinghaus, some of you won't. But if I just signpost it, do go beyond the basic graphics and read, here's all your scholarly articles, there's loads of videos. But in essence, just like I will say here, you're going to forget half the stuff I've said on this webinar. Okay, so I wouldn't believe these statistics exclusively the way they're written, but you get the principle that after an hour after this webinar, you're going to forget half the stuff. So it's important to watch back on the video, look at the slides, maybe get to a place where you can share it with someone else. That's going to improve your professional development as a teacher. And now again, I would probably adapt this theory back into your classroom when you're building your schemes of work. Now, this is really difficult for teachers to achieve because we go back to this PhD type theory, the science, but as a teacher, I'm so busy with so much to do, I don't have time to plan or to build this in if I've got to teach to the test. So the best resource I can ever signpost to you is this one. So can you just give me a yes or no in the chat box? Have you seen this before, a yes or a no? And I'll just start to explain it. Okay, so we're getting a mixed bag. So this comes from the learning scientists. Okay, thank you. So 50-50. If I just show the websites, so I started to read the learning scientists probably about 2012 or 13. These are 4, forget the website right. These are 4 female cognitive scientists. 2 are based in Dundee University. 2 are in Boston. And they've got this great website, loads of resources. loads of practical techniques. And as I've seen their blog grow, it's gone into podcasts and they do training sessions and all sorts. And they've got here, if you go to the navigation menu, the resources, they've got all these PDFs and PowerPoints for parents, for students. Great for revision season. Obviously, that's up for debate at the moment. We're going to find out probably later this week. But there's tons of stuff in here. I would sign up to their newsletter. We've got podcasts. If I just go into my search bar, I have interviewed Carolina, who's one of the scientists based up in Dundee. And she talks about retrieval and cognitive science and the work of the learning scientists. And one of the resources I found on their blog going back to 2013 was this simple tool. The simple art of writing it down. So last month, kids, I talked to you about phronesis. Last week, I reminded you what it meant, professional wisdom. Last lesson, we learned how to apply it in our classroom practice as wise teachers. And today, I asked you how to spell it, what does it mean, how to spell it backwards, those types of things. I see this as a great curriculum plan, a lesson plan tool, and a great thing. If you have this on A3 paper, laminate it, put it on kids' tables, give kids all a board pen and ask them to retrieve for 3 or 4 minutes every single lesson. I think this is a really good tool to support kids. And I think once we start to understand memory, not only will you be a better teacher, but if the kids start to understand how they learn, using these types of techniques, they'll be better at revising and retrieving information. So that's a great tool, learning scientists. There's loads more. If I think of how I've applied this throughout my whole career, the 5-minute lesson plan would be one example. So this has had over 1 million downloads on my site. I designed this when I was working with many new teachers and I wanted them to move away from detailed lesson plans. Probably about 2007 I created this. When a time when Ofsted in England, the inspection and SLT to some degrees wanted detailed lesson plans to help observers. And it worked on the basis that let's reduce the extreme lesson plans from 2 or 3 pages to a 1-page summary. And let's think about the core concepts. So the big picture is essentially the context of the lesson. What would be photosynthesis, phronesis, 2 + 2? Stickability is the make it stick. That's the cognitive side, that when you leave my lesson, when you come back, I'm going to quiz you on the core concepts that you've learnt so that I build up over time rather than cramming it in at the end. Or if I think back to 15+ years ago, I used to teach the whole scheme of work and then quiz kids for an end of unit test. And although that may still happen, what I didn't do was regularly quiz consciously. So the what, why, and then how you teach. Everyone teaches in a different way. You've got it all here. So those teachers listening who have got that phronesis, you'll be doing this over a period of time. Lesson 1 is your photosynthesis. Lesson 2 is biomass fuel. Lesson 6 is there water on Mars? And then as we start this lesson, we'll quickly quiz kids. Right, what does photosynthesis mean? Can you spell it? Right, let's move on. A week later, we're on to something else, but let's keep quizzing on these core concepts as we move through the curriculum. So the 5-minute lesson plan, just in case not everyone's seen it, click on the 5-minute plan up here. You've got the original templates as they've evolved. There's a digital version. You can sign up for a month's free access while you're all at home at the moment. If you want to, the great thing about the digital one is you can change all the headings, so you can turn it into a scheme of work or a resource for homework, for home learning with kids. You can add tags and they all download as PDFs. But if you scroll down, I guess this is the kind of jewel in the crown part of the site, is I've got 35 incarnations of different aspects of school life. So you've got anything from assemblies to lesson plans to CPD to, for us children, hi miss, I'm stuck, what do I do next? So there's another retrieval model here. And I guess going back to that cognitive science, the research, this is dual coding that I guess I wasn't aware that I was dual coding in my day-to-day life as a school leader and a teacher. So there's tons on here. If you're interested in research, there's a research plan. If you ever have to speak in front of other teachers, and I'm sure that will happen at one point, you've got a, how do I frame this whole training session now that you've listened to me? How would you share this in a 20-minute session if you did an after-school workshop? So all these are explained on the blog. You just type the title into the blog, you'll get the template, and the blog, the templates explained. But I think that might help also with our own professional retrieval. I'm going to finish with this, a bit of research. So I put this in my new book, Just Great Teaching. If I just click the blog link here and open it up. So this blog here, quiz pupils 3 times. So that's your title you're looking for. You're looking for this graphic, which has got an image of a brain. You need to go beyond the headlines, but I obviously have read it in a bit more depth, and I'm putting out the claim that in this research, that if you, let me get it just here, it's about here. If you're retrieving key concepts with students 2 or 3 times, this research, and obviously you need to look at the context of the students are sampled, it improves pupil retention up to 150 times in the long term. So something to read while you've got a bit of time at home. I'm going to finish with this. If I just go to my webinar pages, I did the first one the other day, so I'm resharing the things that I've learned about memory and trying to do it in a webinar. So these yellow graphics, so I got one on Thursday, a couple after Easter. If I just start with the kind of headlines, short-term memory, phronesis. Working memory, spell it backwards. In a month's time, if you check back in with this webinar, you're going to remember that word phronesis. And if I keep quizzing you in the lesson, become part of your teacher DNA. Under your long-term memory, you've got explicit and implicit memory. And this is often you might have heard maybe on Twitter or Dylan William, people like that. It's really important to make the implicit explicit. We have to bring our unconscious into our consciousness. So what might happen in our implicit is priming is a bit like bias. If I say doctor, if you think of a man, you're letting your subconscious or unconscious bias take control, whereas we can get female doctors. If I think of priming from a practitioner point of view, as a DT teacher, I think about it as an undercoat. So if I go 1 + equals, 1 + 1 equals, I'm learning the mechanisms of how to count. If I go A, B, C, D, and I ask you to recall the next letter, if you say E, you've been primed to repeat the alphabet. Can anyone, I'm going to just unmute you for a moment to finish off. Is anyone on the video, can anyone say the alphabet backwards? Anybody? So I've asked this question to 22,000 teachers on my travels. I've met about 7 people that can. And when I ask them how do they know it, their simple answer is they practiced it. When we go to school, we're not taught the alphabet backwards, we're taught it forwards. And there lies the kind of answer. If we don't practice and regularly retrieve or find these cool concepts of knowledge, such as our stickability moments, then we can't expect kids to remember stuff. It becomes unconscious. In here, we've got things like, I know how to ride a bike, but I couldn't describe it to you. Procedural memory is I know how to ride a bike. It's a skill, a bit like critical thinking, problem solving. But in the explicit, we've got that I know that this is a pen. I know this is a coffee cup. But the skill is I know how to hold it without dropping the liquid, and I know how to sip from it. So that's a skill that I've learned that's now unconscious. So under here, you've got maybe the knowledge and skills debate. Having different skills, critical thinking, problem solving is a knowledge in itself. We just might want to call it skills as teachers. And over here, we've got in our explicit memory, episodic memory, which are personal events. So that's the emotional side, our birthdays, our weddings. And then we've got semantic, general knowledge. So I'm going to ask Rebecca. Rebecca, have you ever been to a wedding, either your own or someone else's?
Yeah.
Is it your own or someone else's?
Both.
Okay, could I ask you to describe what you were wearing on your wedding day?
Yeah, it was a separate skirt and bodice. There was a long train. I had a veil and a tiara. The dress was gold. Okay,
so we're now into personal events. That's a personal, memorable moment for Rebecca. Now, a lot of that will be emotive. Some of the details may be missing. And then we need to start thinking about semantic memory. So if I talk about 9/11, Rebecca, what does that bring into your memory?
I was teaching netball at the time on the playground. It was a beautiful sunny day, but it was incredibly quiet.
And what does 9/11 mean to you, those numbers?
The bringing down of the Twin Towers.
Okay, so there is the world around us, but I've got my own episodic memory. I'll give you another example. If I say the word turkey, Rebecca, what do you recall?
Christmas dinner?
Okay, not the country.
No.
Okay. Now, if you were America, you might say Thanksgiving because turkey's shared at Easter, not Christmas. So you can see how certain concepts or keywords make us retrieve certain things. So the best thing I can give you here is in all the kind of curriculum that you have to teach, and I'm going to assume you all know about knowledge organisers, but just to
Blended that fruit
go,
cocktail, didn't I?
I'm just going to
Blended
put
that fruit
on,
cocktail.
just going to
So
mute
now
it
he's
there.
eating it as fruit puree with yogurt.
Knowledge organisers, which I'm sure most of you've seen, but if you just Google it, you'll find loads of examples of how you get your curriculum on a page. It's one for me, it's one for the kids, and it gets all the core concepts and knowledge on a page. You've got to be conscious of cognitive overload. There's tons of stuff on here. Looks great as one resource, but you know, whether this is for year 11 or year 7 will be an interesting question. But I need to build in that retrieval moment. I then go back to those questions about Turkey, about 9/11 or a wedding, and I need to be conscious that some of us may have emotional responses or semantic, which are general knowledge about the world. So 1 + 1 is 2, A, B, C, D, E, 9/11 Twin Towers, coronavirus, etc., etc. And I think if we understand this, it will allow us to start to get all this side of what is unconscious or bias. And that also includes children who think they have done loads of revision, that their effort is, I guess, misevaluated. They think because they've sat and tried to revise for 30 minutes, they think they've learned something when actually they've not learned how to quiz themselves. So I'm sure some of you will be familiar with metacognition and how we learn. That needs to be shared with kids also. So I'll leave it there. There's that research summary, the link to the blog. I'm going to send you all the slides. I've got another webinar later this week on memory if you want to learn more. I'm going to pause, turn your microphones on if you've got any questions. Everyone gets normally a bit shy at this point and doesn't say anything, but if you want to hang up, that's up to you. But I think that's just a nice beginner stroke intermediate introduction to retrieval, which is what we all do in our teaching practice, but we may do it subconsciously. So we need to build this into our more conscious teaching mode. I guess the challenge for us all now is how do we do this while we're all at home when our kids are also at home also. But make sure you check that Zoom blog, the safeguarding blog. I'll just remind you where that is to wrap things up. It's you click blog at the top, it's that first one there. Loads of tips. You've got the 46 ideas how to teach online. And I've been reading quite a lot of content from teachers in China. If you want to get a few insights into life 8 weeks ahead, it's all kind of summarized here if you're interested. That might be an interesting read. It's kind of accepting where we are, and we're going to be home for 8 weeks, so we need to kind of embrace it and adapt and look after ourselves as well as our kids. So I'm going to stop there. If you've got any questions, fire them over, put them in the chat box or ask them now. Otherwise, have a great afternoon. I hope you think it was worth a £5. Thanks for signing up. I'll send the video in half an hour once it's compressed.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for everything. Very useful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Thank you
Take
very
care of
much.
yourselves.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. All right, Paul, that's a few for you now, 2 or 3 in the bag.
Yeah.